Hey guys, I'm doing a different format for story rules on Saturday today. I'm basically looking at story frameworks, many of these that you have heard of, and trying to see what's the underlying principle that a lot of these frameworks share. So let's begin. Now, stories have been around since the dawn of civilization, and humankind kind of uh, discovered agriculture and settlements and civilization later, but stories have been around much before that. So these are cave paintings from France, which are telling stories, and 17,000 years ago, right? Agriculture was 10,000 years ago. So we've been telling stories for a very, very long time. But story frameworks, most likely the first guide to analyze storytelling and come up with a common framework that said, okay, all stories are like this, was probably Aristotle. And in his book Poetics, he talks about the fact that every plot, every story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mind blown? Well, I know this is quite simple, but hang on, we're going to dial up the complexity a little bit here. The next big story framework is a German novelist, is by a German novelist called Gustav Freytag, and it's called the Freytag's Pyramid. And he talks about 5 parts of a story: exposition, which is like the context setting; rising action, which is when the hero gets into trouble and things are happening; climax, which is like the high point of that action; falling action, when things are slowly resolving and concluding; and denouement, a French word meaning unknotting, which is, tying up all the loose ends. And then there is a slightly more complex hero's journey by Joseph Campbell, US literature prof who studied all mythologies and then said that, all mythological stories have the concept of a hero's journey, where there's a hero, gets a call to adventure, supernatural aid, threshold. It's a little difficult to understand, honestly. I'm not going to get into the details of the hero's journey here, but suffice to say that this was the one that inspired George Lucas to make Star Wars, and it's been the inspiration for a lot of big budget, big picture Hollywood movies. But that's a hero's journey for you. And then you had Sid Field, who made things a little more simpler, taking inspiration from Aristotle, the beginning, middle, end. And he came up with the 3-act structure, which is something that even now a lot of screenwriters use. Praveen Gopalkrishnan of the Ken uses this when he writes his nut graph every week. And so this talks about an Act 1, which is a setup or the context; Act 2, which he calls the confrontation; and Act 3, resolution, with a bunch of interesting plot points thrown in there. And then 1960s, 70s, you had the business focused version of story frameworks by Barbara Minto. And what did she come up with? So she came up with the concept of the SCQA in her bestseller, Pyramid Principle. What is this? This is basically a similar thing. There's a situation or a context, and then there's a complication. There's a question that the business needs to answer, and then there is an answer which hopefully resolves that complication and that question. There's a CQA, and then this is not the end of it. There are a plethora of frameworks by storytellers like us. I'm guilty too. There's Park Howell's story cycle system, Donald Miller's story brand framework, Nancy Duarte's story structure. There's a guy called Ravi Shankar Iyer who has got a 7C story structure. It doesn't end there, right? So there's a lot of... Now, what's happening here, right? if you kind of step back and see, one, why are there so many frameworks? How are they similar yet different? Which one is the right framework? So I'm going to try and answer some of these. Before we get to story frameworks, let's step back and then realize why story itself. Humans have been sharing stories since millennia, right? So we discovered fire, we sit around the fireplace. What would we do? We would exchange stories. And these were our means to convey information. And Yuval Harari kind of calls it our superpower, right? And there's this brilliant passage from Sapiens where he says myths, stories, give sapiens the unprecedented ability to cooperate flexibly in large numbers. There are other animals which can work together in huge numbers but in rigid manners, or wolves and chimpanzees which are flexible but in small numbers. It's only humans who can cooperate flexibly and in large numbers, and stories are the way by which we do it. Why are stories so important though? What is the information that is really being shared by these stories? And here's where I'm coming to the main insight of this piece. So according to me, stories are critical because they are sharing something that is fundamental to humankind. What is that fundamental? What is that thing that stories are sharing? Problem solving. Now let's step back. All of humankind is engaged in one of two activities. One, we are either trying to solve problems, And what are problems? Problems are nothing but needs. We all have needs. We are defined by our needs. And Maslow's hierarchy is a good place to start. We've got physiological safety, belonging, esteem, self-actualization. Every need is a problem to solve. Once you have solved that problem, you need to tell others about it. And every problem solved is a story to tell. And so, once you have solved a problem, that problem may be faced by other people too. They have already faced it or they may face it in the future. And you need to teach them how to solve it. Right? So that's why story comes. Why is story a better way of teaching? Let's take a small case study. This is an incident that happens, let's say, in the cave men of ancient times, in millennia back. This is what happens. Number one, our man is suddenly seeing a tiger, gets scared, runs to the nearest tree, and then he's safe. He's fine. This is what happens in the morning. Later that day, in the evening, this guy goes, gathers up all the people in the house and then says, listen up, altitude matters. Always take the higher ground. Great lesson. But isn't it jargonish? Isn't it abstract? All these guys here are like, hey, altitude, but why? Hey, give us some context, please. One guy's sleeping. What is the meaning of altitude? Right? So this is a problem. Instead, if this guy starts, hey, you won't believe what happened today. I was walking in the forest when, oh my gosh, a tiger. Tell me everything. Whoa, you're kidding, right? The reactions are totally different, right? If it's told as a story, people are interested. And that is the reason that's the reason why stories matter. In short, a story is an account of how to or how not to solve a problem. Simple as that. Let's get back to our story frameworks to really test it out, right? So you've got Aristotle, Freytag, Hero, 3-Act, SCAQ, 7 Cs. What's happening here? Aristotle. You start with the beginning, you describe the problem, and the middle and the end is about the solution. Freytag's pyramid, the problem is the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement is the solution. Hero's journey. You start with the problem, then you talk about the solution. 3-Act structure, problem, solution. SCQA, problem, solution. 7 Cs, problem, solution. Right? So, with this video, I don't want to talk about saying which is the best framework, what framework works. All of those frameworks are useful in some way. Some of them are more detailed, some are less detailed. But at the end of the day, everything is talking about a problem faced by a person and the solution that they adopted or they should adopt. And that's what it's trying to teach you, that, hey, look at this. Maybe this applies to you. Maybe you should also try it. In conclusion, a story has to tell the audience who is the protagonist, what was their status quo, what changed in their world. Change is a usually crucial element. What problem did that change give rise to? Why should the audience care about that problem? What was the solution? What were the obstacles and pitfalls in implementing that solution? How did the hero or the solution manage to navigate those pitfalls? And what lesson or implication do you finally draw from that story? Right? So problem, solution. If nothing else, I just want you to remember that all storytelling is about telling about a problem and the solution. And if you'd like more good stuff about this from the land of storytelling, follow me at your preferred location. Thank you.